Hello, my wonderful people. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, depending on your time zone or anytime you are coming across this platform, Linda's TV show. If it is your first time and you like what we are doing here, after watching this video, kindly subscribe, put on your notification bell to all notifications. In that way, you will be able to know when we upload a new video. I want to appreciate YouTube for creating this wonderful platform which we are using to disseminate information to the members of the public. At the same time, I want to put a disclaimer that here in Linda's TV show, I do not promote violence, I do not promote hate speech, I do not promote misleading information. Myself, I don't like it. We react to all forms of videos. So, I also...
Well, you're welcome to Inside Sources.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I welcome you even though in your office. Yeah. So, I was at your hearing today and I observed, how passionate and how detailed you have become on the Nigerian question is that, especially, Christian persecution and the rest of that. But before we go into that, I wanted to ask you, how did your meeting go with the Nigerian delegation yesterday?
It was very frank, civil, serious disagreements. I think they need to better understand what country of particular concern actually means. I said, we stand in solidarity with the oppressed. I work on human rights across the board.
Right.
And when people are being oppressed and the government fails to take action, and that's why they were designated CPC, particularly with what's going on with the genocide against the Christians and also the killing of Muslims, moderate Muslims.
Right.
All of it, there's more they can do and must do as a government to protect the vulnerable. So that was my message yesterday. They, I think, kind of look at the CPC designation as a punishment. I said, lose that. It's a mirror. One of the great things about the United States of America is that everybody is here. I mean, we are the United Nations. You mentioned a diaspora from any country anywhere in the world. They're here. So
I spent 17 years.
I know, and that makes us have a certain strength, I think, of having that kind of diversity. People speak up and they say, "Hey, what about my people back home? Name them back home, wherever it might be." And I have human rights. I've chaired 700 congressional hearings on human rights over the years. 700, and a lot of them are trafficking and religious freedom. And what I find is that because we have very informed people from countries like Pastor Samuel, it's very helpful to listen to them, to act, to do our due diligence in terms of investigations, talk to a wide swath of very informed people, and also talk to the government, like in this case. So, I said, look at this as a pivot for the president and for your government. We can't look askance as all of these Christians are being killed, and moderate Muslims, but more so on the Christian side. And the Fulani have emerged almost untouched by government intervention, by good law enforcement. And when you hear all of these pastors talking about how so many of their people have been slaughtered, we had one woman that you saw at our hearing, she lost 5 of her kids. And 5. That's it. Exactly. And over my many years, I've talked to more survivors, and it's like, it just breaks your heart. Now, government should say, okay, it breaks our hearts too, in Abuja, and we're going to do something about it. I do think that Trump's designation also is a pivot towards better cooperation on the military side. There's much more we could do in partnership with capabilities that might be needed, like night vision goggles, intel especially. We do fight a lot of efforts globally on terrorism, so it gives us some insights on how to combat that. And they need to, I believe, avail themselves of that partnership and make, the average person anywhere in Nigeria feel safe.
Okay. So what did they say to you? Because it turns out that there are quite a lot of top Nigerian officials in this meeting with you. What was their response to you, in essence?
Well, they still think that CPC is a punishment, and I said, I hope you'll stop that. Look at it as an opportunity to help the dispossessed to help the Christians who are suffering and moderate Muslims. And I think it's an engraved invitation to say, yeah, let's take a better look at that. Right. We have not investigated this the way we should. We have not deployed the kind of resources that are needed. I mean, the fact that so many, and I raised this last night and at the hearing, so many people in the IDP camps are not getting the help they need. They're being told, go home. They can't go home. And they need food, and they need shelter, and they need medicine. Right. And, we're more than helpful as a government to do what we can to help. But Nigeria has resources as well, right. But it has to have the will to help. And so that's part of it. But their comeback to me was they don't think that Christians are being killed because they're Christians. And I said, I must vehemently disagree with that. Sometimes there might be some other factor thrown in. Global warming is not the reason. And that's what the Biden administration said for 4 years when they revoked the country of particular concern status. Really get real. When you go in there and you're slaughtering people, AK-47s, doing all these things, and shouting out slogans that are very, very, Muslim-like. Right. And again, I'm not against Muslims. I'm against terrorists, and that's what these people are. And so I said, this is an opportunity. Look at it that way. Right. I mean, Trump is very good, and Secretary of State Marco Rubio is very good. You heard the two people from the administration today. Right. They're committed. They really want to make this work so that CPC designation is not even needed anymore. Yeah. And I have found over the years, whether it be for trafficking, because we have a designation there, or religious freedom, that when a country says, hey, thank you, they don't say it today, you do it. But over time, they say thank you. Right. Because we're helping them to help themselves.
Absolutely. So I am convinced, clearly about the idea of Christian genocide in Nigeria. Yes, I am too. Especially Plateau and Benue and parts of Southern Nigeria.
Exactly.
Now, however, I'm also concerned about the rhetoric being divisive. Which is what a lot of the Nigerian community people are saying. That, well, look, let's manage this so that it's not divisive, so that we're not minimizing the Muslims that are also being killed. How do you respond?
Well, I never do minimize it. I never do, and I think it's important to be accurate. You're a journalist, 3 A's of journalism, accuracy. We need to be accurate. More Christians are being slaughtered than Muslims. But I've spoken over the years with many imams in Nigeria, in country, who have told me that if they speak out, they'll be killed, or their members of their mosque will be killed. So it's a terrible threat, like the sword of Damocles hanging over so many people's heads. But in terms of division, we need a unified Christian-Muslim effort. I suggested last night that they convene a summit. Bring all the church leaders in. Muslim, Christian.
Okay, you suggested it to the Ribadu delegation.
Yes, I said this to the delegation and said, when you get people in the room and you start really talking about solutions and agreeing that there is a problem here, things can happen. And, calling on God to guide the effort, but there has to be the will to do it. Right. And that's what's been lacking. In the 4 years of Biden, when he took away country of particular concern, and he could have really, really done some good things, was a lost opportunity. But let's claim it now.
Absolutely. So I want you to tell our audience, because there's quite a lot of spin that Mr. Trump is going to invade Nigeria. Do you think that's
no? I think the president, he's the kind of president that always has all the options on the table. And frankly, the idea that Christians are being slaughtered the way they are is so horrific and so terrible, so egregious that, he said that, but what he and Rubio and all of us want is for law enforcement and the military to better corroborate to stop this threat. And it does take resources. It takes political will. It takes an expertise that needs to be honed very effectively. I mean, there aren't that many ISIS West Africa, right? 7 to 10 million. There aren't 1,000, not million, thousands. There aren't that many Boko Haram. There are some. They are good at hiding and evading, but when you really have the will to go get them and stop it, and then stop the recruitment that they engage in. I mean, my heart bleeds for all those girls that have been abducted. One number puts it at 1,700 since the Chibok girls were abducted. That's a lot of young women who have been forced into marriages. If they're Christians, they're forced into the Islamic faith. If somebody chooses to convert to any faith, that's their business. But if you're told you do it or else, and they rape these women as the Boko Haram terrorists do, that's got to stop, and it can't stop. There's nothing, I believe, in terms of military and security threat that cannot be mitigated and stopped when there's a genuine will that's sustainable and you have the expertise to do it and the resources. Our government, the United States government, is ready to help on that. I pointed out in my comments today, you might have seen it, that our ambassador to the United Nations, Mike Waltz, he's a Green Beret, 26 years in the military, big on counterinsurgency, knows what he's doing. He was in Abuja teaching and working with the Nigerian SEALs to rescue girls. Really, that kind of collaboration. And he said just this week, what a lost opportunity it was to have country of particular concern abrogated by Biden. But, let's look at this designation in this week in a renewed focus. I mean, Nigeria is a great friend and ally. I have quite a few people in my state who are part of that diaspora, and we're so proud to have them. But back home,
people like Pastor Anyeni.
That's right, Pastor Sam. And it's it's good if we all make sure that it's safe. Because I'm fearful that it could get worse. It's like a stage 4 cancer. Next thing you know, it's everywhere, metastasizing, and these radicals need to be stopped. They just need to be stopped.
Absolutely, and I agree with you on that. We find out that most Nigerians really want that. Now
and demand of their government.
Absolutely.
Demand for Abuja. I mean, I've walked the halls of the House of Representatives and the Senate in Abuja. I met with the Speaker years ago and talked about combating terrorism. In that case, it was Boko Haram only. There wasn't a Fulani as we know it now. It's just like, where there's a will, there's a way.
I think there's a way. Now, so now that the American government has designated Nigeria as the country of particular concern, what happens next?
Okay, it's a 2-step process. The first is based on the facts to designate a country as a CPC or not. The president wisely and Secretary of State Rubio ascertained, based on the facts, that because of the lack of response, the law says directly committing the crimes or enabling them through acquiescence and lack of engagement to try to stop it. Going like this while they're murdering. That doesn't work. So the designation is first. The second part is to look at, as prescribed in Frank Wolf's law of 1998 and my law in the year 2016, that prescribes all of these sanctions that can be meted out, all kinds of, denial of aid and things of that kind. That it's a tool to get to an end. And the end is to see reform. And we're calling for real reform, that the military step up, the police step up, that there be all prosecutors have discretion, prosecutorial discretion about what they do. Well, make this real high on the list to stop the terrorists. Prosecute them, put them in prison for lengthy jail terms, and then you'll see a difference.
Interesting. So
nothing's required once the designation is made. The enforcement of it is at the discretion of the executive branch, which would start with President Trump.
Okay. All right. So while I was listening to your speech, towards the end, you also talked about some of the things that is going to happen, rehabilitation, humanitarian aid.
Yes.
And you also mentioned the fact that, there could also be sanctions, so like visa bans.
Yes.
And will target individuals. Can you talk to us more about that?
In 2004, I wrote the Belarus Democracy Act. And it was novel in that it said to Lukashenko, the dictator in Belarus, who just incarcerates people left, right, and from the middle, that he and anyone involved in that will lose the ability to travel to the United States, so a travel ban, visa ban, and they will not be able to economically do any business here. So it's a twofer. They're the two sanctions. That evolved into the Magnitsky Act, which I also sponsored in the House, the Global Magnitsky Act, and that said the same thing. It gives the ability to the president, conveys it to him, the authority, that if there are bad apples, people doing horrific things, you target them, and they, not the whole government, not the whole country, are sanctioned. And so the Global Magnitsky Act is a very powerful tool, and it works. Doesn't always ameliorates the whole government's work, you know, in what they're doing bad, but it does say, you're sanctioned, can't come here, can't do business here.
Interesting. And so that is going to happen in this case?
Yes.
To Nigerians?
The president now is having made that designation, has this plethora of options, all these options. That's one of them. The simplest option is the demarche. That's the easiest. But after that, there's all kinds of sanctioning that can happen.
Interesting.
And so the president has tools to say, okay, why are we doing this? Because we don't want you hurting your kids and your women and your believers who want to just go to church or to mosque and not be killed.
Interesting. So maybe so I don't take so much of your time. You spoke a lot about your experience in Nigeria. Several times you've come to Nigeria. So I wanted to ask you, what do you think about that country?
Oh, it's a great country. I think the people are incredibly entrepreneurial. They are very good businessmen and women. Very, very faith-filled. I mean, there are a number of Nigerian priests, I'm a Catholic, who are here, and we're like the missionary country. You know, I say that in a nice way. We're glad to have them. And so I think that's very, very good. And it's got so much potential. So many young people, and who will need jobs and, to prosper. I was once told by a bishop, and I think it's stated by a lot of people, but as Nigeria goes, so goes Africa. And you've heard that. I said, that is so true. So Nigeria can absolutely be the model for other nations in terms of democracy, in terms of, the issue of combating terrorism. People should be able to live free and safe. But I've been very impressed with Nigeria. I've met so many courageous men and women, particularly pastors and imams and bishops, who are just who testified today. They're just wonderful people, and they care for their flock if they're a pastor, and so much so that I think they would lay their life down for them. They're so committed to the people they serve. And so it's an inspiration to the world.
Fantastic. Now, so what do you think about the current president of Nigeria, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu? What's your view about him?
My view is that he has to act. I'm not going to go say good, bad, ugly. He has to act. This is done in absolute good faith, the CPC definition or designation, and do it not for us, do it for our own people. They deserve better than looking the other way as all of this happens. They make statements. The foreign minister said a statement on a major television show. One of our colleagues brought this out today about how few people have actually been killed. Please, just tell the truth and combat the evil.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Congressman Chris Smith.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your passion, and thank you for your support of the Nigerian people and your support of the Nigerian community, especially in New Jersey.
And we are praying, my wife and I, my staff, we all pray for Nigeria.
Thank you.
Because I know so many people are suffering.
Thank you so much. I believe that your intervention and intervention of the president, I believe that it's God sent, because we can actually have a cooperation between the U.S. government and the Nigerian government to end what has been despicable killings of our people.
Absolutely. And it can all happen. Just choose it to happen.
Thank you.
And then do all the hard work to make it happen.
Thank you so much.
I'm having a conversation on what is happening in the country. Two important items. The implication of the judgment that was passed on the case of Mr. Nnamdi Kanu and of course, the series of attacks on schools in Nigeria. Now, I am here in the United States where we are covered on Thursday the congressional hearing on Nigeria. But my guests are in the studio. So for this important conversation, I'd like to welcome back to Inside Sources, Mr. Ibrahim Wali, an Abuja-based lawyer. Mr. Wali, welcome back to Inside Sources.
Thank you, Mr. Laolu. It's always a pleasure joining you on Inside Sources.
All right, thank you. And also, a leading Nigerian security strategist is also with us, also returning to Inside Sources. I'd like to welcome back Dr. David Okoro. Dr. David, good to see you again.
Always my pleasure to be here.
All right. Now, let's start with you. You are a security strategist. How do you read what is happening with all this, a resurgence of attacks by terrorists, abducting school children in the country that has led to, as a matter of fact, the federal government now shutting down, many of the unity schools. How do you read this, Dr. Okoro?
I think that so many things have happened, and they will continue to happen. But my concern is the reaction. I mean, to all the recent incidents and security issues that we have had, the reactions of government have been knee-jerked, and I think largely they have been questionable. Because I say to you, Steve, for the terrorists, every terrorist or group have their objective to create a sense of fear and insecurity. That's what they want to do. So they catch somebody and they slaughter that person and take photographs and show to the entire world to put fear in people's hearts. That's the objective of the terrorists. And for the bandits, yes, they also want to create fear so that anytime they ask for money, people will run around to provide money for them. But when you have a situation, when the government of a nation will, out of panic, and because of the fear of terrorists and kidnappers, close schools and ask people to go home, the government have played into the hands of terrorists by creating a sense of exaggerated fear that there's insecurity in the country, and this shouldn't happen. It means that we have acquiesced to terrorists. We have shown that the bandits are bigger than Nigeria itself. So when you close schools, you are saying to the whole nation, there's no security anywhere. Because what should have been done is that government say, to hell with whatever the terrorists want to do. We will not bow to terrorism. We will not submit to terrorism. We are a sovereign nation, and so we'll defend our country. And so whatever it will cost to keep Nigerian schools open, government is supposed to have ensured that the schools are open. That is to build confidence in Nigerians, build confidence in foreigners that Nigeria is a safe country. But what we have done now is to create an exaggerated sense of that there is insecurity in Nigeria. Now, currently, as I speak to you, schools around the country are closing, universities are closing, secondary schools are closing, people are closing schools all over the country. What this is saying to you is that whether the Minister of Information comes to tell you Nigeria is safe or the ministry is telling you Nigeria is safe, the optics, what we hear is that Nigeria is not safe, and it is not right for us. So what we are saying is that we have lost the initiative to protect our country. We are submitted to violent criminals, that they are the one that rules over our nation. And by the way, when there's election or there's going to be election, we used to have what they call a show of force. We need to have a show of force now. We need to have our Air Force patrolling our schools. We need to deploy drones, military drones, all manner of drones to fly around our schools and secure those schools, not shut the schools. I think it's a terrible decision, and our government must reverse those decisions.
Okay, so I'm going to stay with you, Dr. Okoro, because those are very important points that you have stressed, as to the implication of what the government is doing. Now, you don't see it as trying to be to conserve what it is, but you see it as a knee-jerk reaction that has emboldened the merchants of terror. Now, my follow-up question is, do you think that reflects the lack of capacity, in the area of security? I mean, was that action taken because, the government itself feels that we don't have enough of what is needed to do what you said? to show force? Is it that we are not capable of doing that? Is that the meaning of this, Dr. David?
It is making strategic decisions when a nation is in crisis. So now what is supposed to be done in this kind of situation is to redeploy its material management, to redeploy your resources to where your national security is concerned. It's not this kind of decision that have been made. So what you are looking at is to say to all the time, tell the citizens, we are a government, we have the capacity to protect you and make it visible. So what it therefore means is that whatever it will take, look, there are a lot of military, police, DSS people that are in Abuja. They are protecting individuals, for goodness sake. If you are a comedian, you have some money, you will have police guards. You have police and police guards around you. Politicians have police guards. Now, those are the people that are supposed to be protecting the public space. The Nigerian police alone have over 120,000 policemen protecting individuals. And we have nothing to protect this public space. We are at war. What is supposed to be done now is that we mobilize all our resources to protect the vulnerable population. I say to you, like the schools, how many schools do we have? If it means saying to the chief of army staff, every school must be safe in the north, tell the president, give that instruction, deploy your men and ensure, you chief, Inspector General of Police, ensure, and if anything goes wrong, you will be held responsible. This is a time for the president, for goodness sake, to show leadership. To show leadership that our country is in crisis, our country is it's at war, that we must deploy resources now, mobilize everything that is available. Do you know what it means across the world to hear that schools in Nigeria are shutting down gradually? Today, like I said, several schools have shut down. Groups of schools are shutting down. In the north, state governors are shutting down schools. They are shutting down public schools. Private schools are shutting down. What he's saying to you is that this government have failed. I don't need to use the word the government have failed, but that action shows that government have failed because this shouldn't happen. It shouldn't happen at all. Now, the excuse is that, okay, let us protect and ensure it's good to err in the side of caution or whatever. Let us caution so that it doesn't happen. Then why do we have a government? Why do we have the military? Why do we have the police? Is it only to go around Abuja blowing siren that we have the police for? This is what we need to have. This is why we have a country and we have an armed forces. We have a police force. This is the reason why we have it. Not that some few ragtag boys are taking the whole country for granted and we are all running helter-skelter, closing our schools. For me, it bothers me and I think it's a national shame.
Yeah, it's certainly something for great worry. But let's go to Mr. Wali. And Mr. Wali, you are a lawyer, and we're going to talk also about Mr. Kanu'S case. But I want to ask you regarding this issue of security. Now, a few days ago, the delegation of the federal government led by Mr. Nnamdi Kanu'S also had the Attorney General, the Inspector General of Police, the Chief of Defense Staff. They've been in the U.S. and they've held a series of meetings with U.S. government officials, both in the legislative arm of government and the executive arm of government. As a matter of fact, on Friday, they met with the Secretary of the Department of War. They have also been meeting with members of the Congress. Now, in some of those meetings, we have information that was given to us by Congressman Smith and Congressman Randy Moore, that they challenged the Nigerian delegation to show evidence that many of these attackers, many of these terrorists are being even prosecuted or arrested. But that there wasn't anything significant to show that there is, in fact, an active criminal justice system that is going after these merchants of terror, merchants of violence. Mr. Wale, you are a lawyer. What is your assessment in terms of why has it been so difficult to prosecute these people, to put them, in the pipeline of our legal judicial system?
Thank you for this question, Mr. Laolu. I am not surprised by the reports coming out of the United States of America regarding the lack of information, the lack of coordination, and the lack of data on the part of the Nigerian government. I think if you look at if you watch the interview of the foreign minister, our foreign minister, Mr. Toga, with Piers Morgan, he was put to the knife as to what are the numbers of the people who actually killed in Nigeria? You said you disagree with the numbers presented by international bodies. So what are the real numbers? And he could not provide any numbers. So it is very evident that there is what is called, or what I call, a no policy by the government at this minute. That is, you cannot point to any central coherent policy of the government that is aimed at tackling this particular situation, this insecurity situation that has lingered for more than a decade now. Well, we know that with regards to your question specifically, it is very simple. I don't think that in the last decade we have seen any law passed by the National Assembly that is geared towards this action, towards this issue specifically. And without any enabling law, I don't think that there can be any mechanism or any machinery that sees to their quick prosecution, or even what is it called, arrest in the first place, because you have to arrest, investigate, and then prosecute. So there is no mechanism, there is no anti-insurgency or insecurity law that has been passed as a response, as a proactive response that maybe creates a special court or creates just gives the armed forces some sort of leeway or leverage in fighting this carnage. There's no centralized policy, not that we know of anyways. There's no none of these things have been provided for. So without all of these legal backing and foundations, then you cannot necessarily, or you cannot effectively prosecute terrorists. And if you look at our court as they are currently situated, obviously their dockets are congested. Cases like the Nnamdi Kanu case that we are going to talk about in a bit, it lingered for about 10 years. Most of the cases linger for more than 5, 6, 7, 8 years. So there's just no sadly a current policy or framework that allows for the ease of prosecution of terrorists. That is, if we have even passed the threshold of the definition of terrorist, because as it is currently, on one hand we hear bandits, we hear herdsmen, we hear this and that. I like to think they are all terrorists. They all exert fear on the people, they all kill the people, they all pillage their resources, so they are terrorists. So we are even having more foundational problems about the definition of these people and their acts, before we even go into the mechanism. But there is no machinery in place, there is no law in place. The anti-terrorism bill that was passed in 2022 was a repeal of the 2013 Act. It didn't bring anything new in terms of prosecuting terrorists, or in terms of expanding the definition, or in terms of expanding the scope, or in terms of strengthening the law enforcement agencies to ensure that this thing is brought to an end. So I think the National Assembly, and the various state houses of assembly in the respective states, especially in the north, are to contend with this failure. There is just no policy whatsoever that I know of, and I'm sure that if there is any, Mr. David, being a security expert, is going to, and he hasn't mentioned any. So it doesn't seem as if there is any coherent plan or legislation, that is geared towards solving these issues. And I believe that is where the foundational problem is at the minute. We remember when the president issued a state of emergency order in Rivers State for a political reason that we felt like was even unconstitutional. But how long is it supposed to take before we say a state of emergency in most of the states of the north? In my state, for example, in Niger State, where students were kidnapped, more than 200 students were kidnapped just 48 hours ago in St. Mary's School. There is no state of emergency whatsoever. There is no policy. In fact, you don't get that there is a sense of, urgency or responsibility from the government. There is no proactive measure. The State House of Assembly have not met to discuss the issue, at least not in, we are not informed about it if there's any, but I believe that there is not. So there's really no policy. There's really nothing. The government is not doing anything whatsoever. So I'm not surprised that is the case in the United States of America. The government doesn't seem to have any data or any coherent plan. And that is why Toga was struggling with Piers Morgan. He had no data. He had no coherent plan. What are you actually doing? What are you going to do? There's really nothing on ground. So I'm sure that that position was what influenced or informed the statement of the Congress member you mentioned earlier.
Okay, yeah. So, Wally, I'll stay with you before we shift gears. So, but you are not saying that there are no codified laws in Nigeria for prosecutors to use. That's not what you are saying, because I imagine that there will be certain laws that are currently in our books that can be used to prosecute, many of these terrorists. You're not saying that we have no law completely. That's not what I'm saying.
Their offenses would obviously, can obviously be found scattered in different criminal codes, penal codes, and the different federal criminal acts. But I am talking about a specific legislation that fast tracks, a specific legislation that seeks to solve this menace itself, a legislation that bridges the gap of, the timing of court procedures or, the investigation itself, a specific codified legislation that tackles the problem of terrorism in Nigeria. Not just a broad legislation that prosecutors may or may not use, but something that really makes their job a lot easier, a lot streamlined, a lot straightforward and codified, something that even the judges, the courts are going to rely upon. That there is none. All we have is the Terrorism Act of repealed in 2022, and that's just a broad terrorism act that used to exist even before now. There is nothing in terms of the current problem Nigeria is facing, say in terms of a proactive or even a reactive legislation, or even a subsidiary legislation, maybe a court practice direction that deals with these issues, at least not one that I know of. That's what I'm saying.
Right. Okay, well, I mean, point well made, and that's a very, very insightful comment. Now, let's shift gears, because of our time, to the judgment that was delivered a few days ago on the Mazi Nnamdi Kanu situation, where Justice James Omotosho, found him guilty and, of a series of charges and sentenced him to life imprisonment. Let's start with Mr. David Okoro. What do you think? What's your take on what has happened? We all saw the drama, and eventually the judge had to come down to say, look, I'm just going to have to give this ruling. What is your reading of the situation, Dr. Okoro?
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I'm an ordinary citizen. I mean, but I watch and I followed what has happened. I think that I like to allow the lawyers and the pundits to look at what has happened. But I am more concerned about the fallout, the security implication of the fallout of that particular judgment. Because listening to what people are saying, there's a lot of drum of war and all that and all that. I just want to appeal to my people from the southeast, another part of Nigeria, to say, what has happened is that the judiciary have run their own system. They've allowed, like Buhari government said, it is with the judiciary. Let them finish what they are doing, and then the matter can now be before the president, who can use his discretion and use his political sagacity to now address the issue. Up to recently, we saw people that got prerogative of mercy, that were discharged from certain offenses. So I think that now judiciary have done theirs. The politicians should now be allowed to take steps to douse the tension and do what is needful. Because really, Kanu case was largely political. And so if it's largely political, wasn't a problem that the judiciary was going to solve. But because the matter was before the judiciary allowed them to do their own bit, I think that now it is at the top of the politicians to take steps to address it for the betterment of our country and for the unity of Nigeria.
Okay, excellent. And, I wanted you to talk about those fallouts while we now go to the core legal issues. That's why we have Mr. Ibrahim Wali. So, Mr. Ibrahim Wali, in your comments, I want you to address the view that, the Nnamdi Kanu situation is more political than anything. That's a view. In addressing your comments about what had happened, I want you to also take that into consideration. Over to you, Mr. Wali.
All right, that's fine. But for starters, I would just love to contextualize the hierarchy of actions as put forth by my good doctor. The Court of First Instance, the Federal Court, has decided its case. It has decided the case, but the defendant also has the window to go to the Court of Appeal, and if it disagrees with the position of the Court of Appeal, to go to the Supreme Court. He has 90 days within which to appeal. So the judiciary has not completely run its course. There are still 2 more appellate stages that the defendant can employ. But it's very important that we mention what the charges are to begin with, because most, I don't think Nigerians, especially most of, non-lawyers are familiar with what the charges are precisely. There are 7 counts. Some of the counts have to do with, core terrorism, like the first count has to do with terrorism, has to do with his broadcast, where he said that people will die. So that was brought under Section 1 of the Terrorism Act itself. Then there is the sit-at-home order, which is the second count that led to economic activities breaking down in the southeast. That in itself was a count. And then there is the self-proclamation of being a member and leader of the indigenous people of Biafra. That is also a count on its own. And there's also the broadcast where he allegedly, he has been convicted now, so I guess we can say that he per the court record, he called for the death of Nigerian personnel and even officials and their family members. And then there is also the count where he allegedly, or rather he informed members of IPOB to make bombs, that is explosives. And then there is the count where, that is the count 7, where, he transported, or he brought in radio transmitters, illegal radio transmitters using household materials. So these are the counts that upon which his case was presented. In a criminal charge, you have to prove your case beyond reasonable doubt. It doesn't matter if the defense rests their case on that of the prosecution or not. The duty of the prosecution is to prove the case beyond reasonable doubt. Even if there is an admission from the defendant, it does not matter. But that doesn't mean that I disagree with the totality of the court's decision, because having not put forth a defense, then the court has no choice but to give some probative value to the evidence before it. And especially, the court relied heavily on the broadcast. And it said that this, while the court acknowledged, the agitations for the legality of agitations for, self-determination, which is recognized both in Nigerian and international law, the court said that there's a limit to agitations, and most of what he said were insightful, and most of what he said were what led to, a lot of the killings. The court mentioned Ahmed Gulak's killing, I think, was it in Imo State? He mentioned, the consequence of the sit-at-home order. One other thing that I disagreed with the court was mentioning the NSAS protest, and I think some of the destructions around the NSAS protest. I personally don't see how, I don't think that his comments, had any direct causal link to what happened during NSAS. Being, apologetic to NSAS myself, being a part of NSAS myself, I was part of the protest. I didn't think of Nnamdi Kanu at any time or point, but this is not me disagreeing with the judgment entirely, but I'm just saying there are aspects of the judgment that I personally do not agree with. But the court, looked at, it's a 144 pages judgment. It's quite a lot. The court looked at quite a lot of these issues, and it held that he is an international terrorist, because I think that there was also a part of the tapes where he spoke about the British High Commission, although that was not part of the charge before the court, which I also have an issue with, and that is why I had to mention the fact that you can go on appeal. And because you're talking about the implication, one other thing that I have an issue is the court's position on the illegal rendition. So it seems to justify, I mean, if I was a prosecutor or an investigator, I would see it as a justification to really, use any means whatsoever to get people to court. And I think that the court ought to have at least warned, law enforcement agencies not to, because there are actually instances. Yes, so there's quite a lot of grounds where the defense can go on appeal.
You've given us a very comprehensive detail, and this is something that we have to continue to talk about. But I wanted to ask, one final question: should Nigeria pursue a political solution on the matter of Kanu? Yes or no? What do you guys think? Let's start with Dr. David Okoro.
Believe me, I think that is the way to go, because it does seem that government has spent disproportionate resources and time prosecuting one man. We have bandit leaders that are known, Bello Tuji, Dogogi, and the rest of them. We have not given a thought. We did the effort to bring Kanu from Kenya to Nigeria was huge. We are not spending that kind of energy to look for bandit leaders and and terrorist leaders and deal with them. We focus so much energy on this man. So I think that for me, it's a political matter, and I think that it will not be addressed to the judiciary because it's a whole people, an idea, it's a movement, and you don't address a movement with this kind of. So it has to be political, and I think the president should be wise to know that it has to be political.
To do that. All right. But I want you to quickly, because I also want you to talk to us in 1 minute, about some of the stuff that is going on in Niger State, where we are told that a politician under the NNPP, a chairmanship candidate, has been in detention beyond the time allowed by law without any kind of charges. I'm talking about Nagenu. I wanted you to also, talk to us in a minute about that. But first, do you think that we should end this matter of Kanu in a political way, considering the fact, just like Dr. Okoro said, that we have not even had any of these bandits and terrorists brought to court the way we managed to bring Kanu to court?
It is very, very difficult. It is difficult to argue against a political solution. So I would say yes. And some of my reasons are, in this same country, we had the terrorist rehabilitation program. In this same country, in Katsina, they are having so-called peace talks with terrorists who come with guns. And in fact, some of them, one of them, in the recent video we saw, they killed a deputy commissioner of police, and he was literally wearing his uniform to the so-called peace talks. Right, so in a country where you have these, then I don't see any reason why we should not explore a political conclusion, especially because of the cause, at least the idea behind the fight. I think we must protect people's right to advocate for self-determination. That is an international right. That is a right that every group in Nigeria ought to actually have, and we need to preserve it. So based on this, I feel like a political solution is imperative. Moving on to Niger State, what is happening is, without mincing words, is a state-backed persecution. And instead of the government and the governor specifically to focus on what is happening, especially in Zone C in Niger State, we've had constant terrorist attacks in Mariga, in Kwantagora, in Ibeto. St. Mary's is just a recent occurrence, but Zone C of Niger State is overridden currently by insecurity, by terrorists. But you really rarely hear about it. Well, what they're doing instead is persecuting dissent. We have Abubakar Isa Makwa, who is 28 or 29 days today in prison simply because he called the governor's attention to the Makwa floods, and he called his attention to the plight of students. Now they've gone on to close all the schools anyway, just to show us that they really do not care about the education of students. It's very important to say that the government mentioned that they had information, they had intel that they were coming into Agwara or into St. Mary's, or rather into Zone C to take children. But instead of sending boots on ground, instead of sending security to cordon off the area, they said that they sent a circular that nobody has seen for the schools to close off. That is admission of incompetence. And we also have Negenu, for example, Abdul Malik, the guy you mentioned, who is currently also in prison in Bidda. His crime is simply to run for office and complain thereafter that there was irregularity during the elections. What actually happened was that the governor had gathered people around in Bidda in their thousands. In fact, there was a stampede the day before in their thousands, just to share money to them. And this is the custom in Niger State today. They will gather people and be sharing 1,000 to 2,000 to them. So the second day when they were sharing the money, the money, could not reach everybody. So the people there were angered, and they started throwing pelting stones at the convoy of the governor. And instead of the governor to go and, reflect, introspect, and ask why we even have this much people on the streets, this much people hungry, they are not in school, they don't have shelter, they don't have anything, there's no dignity whatsoever. They're trying to blame Negenu, Abdul Malik Negenu, simply because he came out, he said that his name and his party's name were omitted in the ballot, and he had at least the people showed him love and support, and he was complaining, and now they said that he was the mastermind behind the attack on the governor's convoy. But even the governor's special advisor and the governor's team, before they backtracked and said, he was Abdul Malik Negenu, they came out and said it was due to the fact that there was too many people in House 7, a hotel in Bidda where the governor was staying at the time, when they were sharing money. And when the money weren't enough and people were angered, they started throwing stones at the governor. It was the governor himself who invited the people there. He was the one who told them to come and take money there. A very unfortunate and misguided way of governing a people. You disempower them. You empower them with poverty. You rid them of their dignity. And at the end of the day, you want to blame an innocent man for what is a natural occurrence. It's a natural occurrence. So what is happening in Niger State is highly condemnable, and we call on the government to release these people ASAP. It is highly condemnable. Persecution is not going to take the place of governance. It's either they face governance. If they are not going to take criticism, then they should give way for those who are able to. But this is a democracy, and we are going to criticize the government however we deem fit.
Thank you so much, Dr. David Okoro and lawyer Ibrahim Wali, for your contributions, and thank you for coming to Inside Sources.
Thank you very much
for having us.
Hello, my wonderful people. As you have finished watching this interesting video, please, I want to see your comment, your contribution, your opinion in the comment section. Like I said earlier, let us do it constructively. Tell me what you think about this video that you have just watched, and also about the platform. If you haven't subscribed, what are you waiting for? Please remember to subscribe, put on your notification bell, share this video, and remain blessed.